Hi guys, I'm Karen Rice and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in, especially if you're new, but also if you return into the channel, thank you for coming back. So today I'd like to do just a kind of a nice, simple watercolor landscape, but with a bonus of having two people in it. But fortunately, the two people are going to be really, really small, so don't worry. But if you've got any questions about the techniques or any of the materials I'm using in this video, please don't hesitate to ask me and put them in the comments section below this video. I hope you enjoy the demonstration. Let's get started. So here's my reference photo that I'll be using for this painting, and you can get this from pexels.com, and I'll put a link in the description below. So here's all the materials I'll be using. I've got a selection of brushes, I've got some masking fluid, some different sort of paints, quite earthy tones, a spritzer bottle, my watercolour paper, my Waterpot, and I've actually, if you can see, I've actually done the drawing already, and I've masked out the top of the lady on the left there. But I'll put a full list of the materials I will be using in the description below. So here's my very simple drawing. I've got a low horizon, I've got a hill to the right, a path meeting up to the horizon, and two very small people. I've got sort of little W's for their legs, little arched windows for their bodies, and tiny, tiny heads. And I'm using a rough paper. I'm just wetting the paper now. As you see, I've got some framing tape around the outside edge, and I'm just going to wet that thoroughly. And I'm mixing up a lovely quinacridone wash here and just putting that into the sky, wet in wet, just around the horizon area. I also have a video on YouTube of how to paint small people, so I'll put a link in this video for that. So now I'm mixing up some Paynes grey. I think a lot of you know this colour. It's a good old colour. I'm actually just dropping a tiny bit of ultramarine in that colour. So it just cools it down a bit, and I'm putting it up in the dark area. And if you can see in the top right hand corner, all those lovely dark stormy skies. So I'm putting this paint in wet, and I'm using a size 8 round sable brush, and I'm leaving the negative space for the clouds. So I'm painting around all those lighter shapes. And you can see the wet in wet gives you a lovely soft out of focused effect, which is really, really nice. As you can see, the clouds, as they get towards the horizon, they get smaller, which will create some depth in your painting. So I'm just continuing on painting wet on wet to the left hand side of this painting, just leaving all these little gaps in and just dropping in a little bit of darker shadow for those clouds, as you can see from the reference photo. Now I'm tilting the painting, just getting the paint moving a little bit. As you can see, it was running down the other way. Now this is a really good tip for you. You can see I'm using the spritzer bottle here because the paint isn't moving how I'd like it to move. It's probably dried off a little bit in certain areas. It's not completely dry, but it's not wet enough to move. So if you put a little spritzer of a little bit of water on the painting, it'll get that paint moving. As you can see here, I've just spritzed it. Now I'm tilting it, and it'll get the paint moving. And also, if things are a little bit dark and you don't want to put a brush through it, if you just spray it gently with a bottle and then tilt it and then wipe off, you can see with a wet edge there, just wipe off all the excess water, you'll get back, you'll get that nice light colour back again. So I'm using this nice large brush, and I'm painting the path that beautiful quinacridone gold. So just continuing this colour to the right hand side and to the left hand side. This is all wet on dry, but if you have a problem painting large areas wet on wet, wet the paper first and then put it in wet on wet. So I'm mixing up a creamy dark green, and I'm just putting that in on the side of the path and for the grass areas to the right and left of the path. And you can use lots of different colours for that. I'm using a turquoise, yellow, sepia. I'm always sort of dipping my brush into different colours. I go with my instincts a lot of the time. Don't be afraid of dark colours, especially at this stage. Have a bit of fun with them. I try to sort of really be brave and put them in, and don't worry. I'm now putting in a dark sepia into this path, trying to keep the perspective so the diagonal lines appear to meet in the distance. I am using my large size 8 sable brush But if you feel more comfortable using a smaller brush, please do so, but always load fresh paint every couple of brush strokes. I'm painting the little hill on the right hand side now. I started off with the sepia, but I'm adding a little bit of the turquoise, and I've actually pinched a little bit of burnt sienna, which wasn't on my original palette. And I'm just putting this sort of lovely dark green on this right hand hill, and I'm putting a little touch of that colour to the left, a little bit on below the hill here, just little touches as you go, using your instincts. Now I'm starting to use my spritzer bottle to spray off a lot of these darker colours so the light colours run over the top of it, and it's a really nice technique to use in watercolour, a little bit like what I was doing in the sky earlier, to create some more light and to create some really interesting effects. But you can see I've got the watercolour paper on a tilt. I'm tilting it to the side now and giving it a little spray as well, just to get everything moving, get everything mixing. It's a little bit of a messy job. If you want to put a cloth or an old towel underneath this, do so. But obviously you have to wipe off all the water, the excess water. Okay, here's a really neat little tip for you. If you rinse your brush, take all the water off it with a tissue and then put it on your painting like I'm doing now, it sort of sucks off some of the paint, it sort of absorbs it, and you get some light areas, and it's quite a nice way of sort of pulling off darks and getting back your light, and it creates this lovely soft atmospheric effect. So it's quite a nice technique, but sometimes you have to kind of repeat it over because the paint kind of runs back in again. I quite like that technique, and it's a good one for you to practice. As you can see here, I'm putting my trusty salt on. I've just given it a little sprinkle. It is ordinary table salt. There's nothing fancy about the salt. I'm now mixing up some really dark colours, some sepia and some blues in my palette, and putting in some darker grasses because obviously I sprayed them off earlier. I'm using a smaller brush now. It's a size 4 pointed sable from Winsor & Newton. I use this brush, a lot of their pointed sables, a lot for sort of small detailed areas of a painting. And now I'm putting dark areas along the path to create the edges of this path, to really sort of guide your eye through to the centre of the painting where these two people are walking. There's a little bit here that I missed out, obviously from the sky and the wash and everything, so I'm just sort of touching that in again. It is damp, so I'm using this small brush with not a lot of paint on it so it doesn't run into the sky and doesn't run all over the place, and make sure that the paint's a little bit on the creamy side so there's not too much water. And I'm just putting now a little bit of dark at the edge of that hill and a little bit on the side of the road. So I'm just putting a little bit of texture on the path. As you can see from the reference photo, it's quite a sort of muddy road. So I want to give all that lovely texture of that muddy road with this sepia. And you might feel a bit scared doing this because it's like putting quite a dark colour on a light background. So, but it is there in the photograph and you want to give that impression. It's quite rural, it's rough terrain. So it's quite a nice thing to do. You're creating lots of texture by using quite a dry brush because the painting has dried off on that road area of the painting. And I'm putting little stony bits and texture with the brush around the edge of the path. Now it comes to one of my favourite techniques, the plastic card. It's just an ordinary store card cut up. Because the paint is damp, it's not dry, I can lift off the paint to sort of reveal lighter areas of the painting. Not only am I doing that, I'm also using the tip of the card to create grasses and you know, darks as well, scoring the paper. I just love this technique. I feel like it's really freeing up. I think it makes you braver because you're not putting wet stuff on your paper now, you're actually pulling off and creating little stones and rocks and making the path look rougher just by using the side of the card. You know, I'm almost just following my instincts now. I'm not even looking at the photograph. I mean, here in the distant hill here, I've actually made another hill to create the texture. You can see the texture in the reference photograph on the right hand side, and look how lovely this card creates that texture. And you're pulling off and you're revealing paint underneath, and there's lights and there's darks. I mean, there's nothing this card can't do. So, painting the people, they are quite silhouetted, as you can see, especially the guy on the right. So I'm just painting with a dark sepia with a touch of Paynes grey just with the point of my brush, and then with the lady just putting on her dark trousers. And I always put a little bit of a shadow underneath just to ground them so they don't look like they're floating on the ground. And I'm just finessing a little now and putting some grasses alongside that shadow bit to sort of soften it a bit. I've got that colour in hand, so I thought I might put a little bit more texture on the right hand side of that hill with the small brush, just sort of scrubbing it on with the tip, just to create some more texture, almost to balance those two people as well. I'm taking off the masking fluid now, and I'm using framing tape. I've frozen it there just to show you I've got the framing tape flat to the paper, and just lift off the masking fluid, and I've given it a good old blow dry as well with a hairdryer before I've done this. And now I'm putting on the little bit of shadow on the left hand side as the light's coming from the right. Do make sure before you take your masking fluid off that you've given your painting a good blow dry, because it can smudge and tear the paper. I'm just painting in the hair and a little bit more detail of the inner arm there, just finishing off. I'm just putting a few finishing touches here on the right. If you look on the left, look how lovely that salt's created those textures that look like little wild flowers. Really pleased with that. As you can see, I've removed the framing tape. I really like that effect of just having a nice white border. I've also done some spattering in the right hand corner. I'm now using just an ivory coloured mount just to frame the picture. I find it's a useful tool to see if I need to do any more painting. I'm quite pleased with the painting because it's got a lovely stormy atmospheric feel. I hope you've enjoyed this step by step. If you've got any questions about the techniques I've used in this video, please put them in the comments section below. If you'd like to see any future videos of mine, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.